What do you mean by critique? And more importantly, what do you mean by pure reason?
Well, they are somewhat archaic terms, borrowed from Prussian jurisprudence and rationalist philosophy. More modern equivalents would be critical examination and purely rational intellect. But we need to cover some background before those terms can be properly explained. Human cognition, at the elementary level, is either perceptual or conceptual. The cognitive faculties corresponding to these two kinds are the perceptive faculty and the intellect. The vast majority of human beings after the preschool years are supposed to have both. These mental faculties have features that are universal across all normal human beings. So, when we say the whatever mental faculty, we mean one that any intelligent human being would possess, unless specified otherwise. There can be no doubt that all our cognitions, whether perceptual or conceptual, have their beginning in experience. How else could our cognitive faculty have been awakened into operation, if not by objects that stimulate our senses? In part, objects themselves produce mental representations in us. In part, objects set our intellect in motion, so to speak, prompting it to compare, connect, and separate those representations. Through these activities, the intellect works up sense impressions as raw material into concepts and understanding. And this working up is what we call experience. Temporally speaking, therefore, no part of our cognition comes earlier than experience, and the beginning of all cognition occurs with experience. But just because every cognition of ours begins with experience doesn't mean it all comes from experience. It might well be that even our mental representation of a thing is a composite of two ingredients. The first is what we take in through sense impressions. The second is what our own cognitive faculty adds from itself, nudged into doing so by those same impressions. If our cognitive faculty really does make that kind of addition, we probably won't notice it at first. Separating it out from the raw sensory material takes intellectual skill, and that skill only comes with a lot of practice. So, the question of whether there is any cognition independent of all experience and even of all sense impressions is not one we can wave away. It needs a closer look. Cognitions of that kind are called purely rational cognitions. They are distinguished from empirical cognitions, which have their sources in experience. Now, human intellect has a peculiar fate in one species of its thoughts. It is troubled by questions it cannot ignore because its own nature forces it to keep asking them. But it is unable to answer them either because they are beyond all its capacity. The field of study that tries to answer these questions is what we call philosophy. Our intellect falls into this perplexity through no fault of its own. It begins with concepts and principles that it cannot avoid using in the course of experience, and experience seems to confirm their validity. By means of these, human intellect rises ever higher to more remote reasons and consequence, as its nature compels it to do. But then it notices that in this way, its objective is never achieved, since the ultimate answers are still not found. So, human intellect feels compelled to resort to concepts that cannot possibly apply to human experience. These concepts seem so little suspect that even people's common intellect has no problem using them. But human intellect thereby falls into total confusion and contradictions. It can tell that error is hiding somewhere, but it cannot find it. The concepts it is relying on transcend all human experience and therefore resist any empirical verification. The battlefield of these endless controversies is nothing else but philosophy. There was a time when philosophy was called the queen of all intellectual knowledge. If we take the will for the deed, she deserved this title of honor by virtue of the preeminent importance of her subject matter. In the current era, however, it is fashionable to treat her with total disdain. The queen, outcast and forsaken, mourned like, once the highest of all by blood, now I am cast out and powerless. In the beginning, under the administration of metaphysicians, her rule was despotic. But since her legislation still retained traces of ancient barbarism, her rule gradually degenerated through civil wars into complete anarchy. The skeptics, a kind of nomad who loathes all steady cultivation of the soil, shattered civil unity from time to time. Fortunately, there were only a few of them, so they could not prevent the metaphysicians from continually trying to rebuild, though without any unanimously agreed plan. Through the empiricists' work in cognitive psychology, it seemed at one point as though all these controversies would be settled once and for all, namely through John Locke's theory. But that's not how things turned out. Although the birth of the alleged queen was traced back to the rabble, that is, to sensory experience, and her pretensions should therefore have been rightly rendered suspect, still, she asserted her claims to supremacy because the alleged genealogy was actually false. So, philosophy slid right back into the same old worm-eaten metaphysics, and with it came the same contempt the discipline was supposed to have left behind. Now, everyone thinks that all paths have been tried and found wanting. So what reigns now is weariness and a wholesale anti-philosophy, which is the mother of chaos and darkness as far as intellectual knowledge is concerned. But it is also, strangely enough, the source, or at least the prelude, of a coming reform, after years of misdirected effort left philosophy obscure, confused, and useless. That is because it is pointless to pretend indifference toward inquiries whose object we cannot by nature be indifferent to. And here is the irony. However much these so-called anti-philosophers try to disguise themselves by ditching intellectual language for an ordinary one, they always fall back into philosophical assertions, the very assertions they claim to despise. They can't help it. Insofar as they think at all, philosophy keeps sneaking back in. But since this anti-philosophy movement is taking place right when all human sciences are flourishing, the fact that it targets precisely that discipline whose knowledge we could least afford to do without, that deserves our investigation.